ओम ज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। नमो विष्णुपादाय विष्णुपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे नित्यानन्द नमस्तुभ्यं हेमानन्दप्रदायिने कलौ कल्मषनाशाय चान्वापतये नमः। नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्य नामने गौरतुसे नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा। So we welcome everyone for today's discussion on Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So we are discussing from Srimad Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 verse number 58. यदा समहरते चायं कूर्मोऽङ्गानीव सर्वशः इन्द्रियाणि इन्द्रियार्थेभ्यस् तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता. So this verse we were discussing yesterday. When a person, one who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects, as the tortoise draws its limbs within the cell, is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. So when a person is able to withdraw his senses from sense object, then he is perfectly situated in perfect consciousness. आवाज कैसे आ रही है बीच में?
कोई तो अनम्यूट करके बार बार बोल रहा है।
अनम्यूट का परमिशन नहीं है।
कोहोस्ट और कोहोस्ट को भी नहीं।
कोहोस्ट को तो रहता है।
हाँ, तो कोहोस्ट का ही आवाज है ये।
Okay. So with this regard, how a person can control one's senses from, how can one withdraw his senses from sense objects? So one who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects. So we were discussing this from Bhagavatam, Hansa incarnation. Yesterday we discussed from this. Once the four sons of Lord Brahma, they asked this question to their fathers, that senses are within sense object and sense object mind. Mind is within sense object and sense objects are within mind. Then how is it possible to separate them? This is a inseparable kind of situation. One cannot separate. So then Lord Krishna took the incarnation of Hamsa, and in the form of Hamsa avatar, Lord Krishna started explaining the real philosophy. So Lord Krishna explained that Guneshu avisate cheto gunas chetasi cha praja jivasya deha ubhayam gunas cheto madatmana. My dear sons, the mind has a natural proclivity to enter into the material sense objects, and similarly, the sense objects enter into the mind. But both this material mind and sense objects are merely designations. Both this material mind and the sense objects are merely designations that cover the spirit soul, who is part and parcel of me. So this is very important transcendental knowledge, that the material mind with which we think of something, with which we feel something, and with which we desire to act in a certain way. All these three functions which the material mind has got: thinking, feeling, and willing. So, according to the philosophy of Bhagavad, according to the Supreme Lord Krishna, this is all just external designations which has covered the real identity of the spirit soul, who is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. So, with this material mind, whatever we think in terms of material sense gratification, in terms of matter, in terms of matter. Matter includes earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego. All these eight separated material elements are considered to be matter. So, with this material mind, uh, its function, thinking, feeling, willing. If the thinking, feeling, willing of this function of mind is in terms of material elements, then that is actually external designation. It does not actually belong to the spirit soul, because the spirit soul is part and parcel or an eternal servant of Krishna. Similarly, uh, the sense objects also, material mind, which is filled with the thought, feelings, uh, and willingness in terms of material sense objects, that is also external designation, has nothing to do with the spirit soul. And similarly, the sense objects which has captured our mind completely, that is also material. Sense objects are also material, no connection at all with the mind, with the spirit soul. So this a very important philosophy Krishna is explaining here. So mind has a natural proclivity. So although mind has got this natural tendency to connect, to enter into material sense objects. And similarly, sense objects has also got to enter into mind. But both these things have nothing to do with the soul. So why the soul proper uh, takes so much serious the business of material mind and sense object? Therefore, after explaining this, the next verse, Krishna clearly explains, Guneshu chavisachittam abhikshanam guna sevaya gunasya chitta prabhava madrupabhyam taje. A person who has thus achieved me, how one can achieve Krishna? As soon as one understands this last line, the spirit soul who is part and parcel of me, jivasya deha vayam madatmana, jivasya deha madatmana, the spirit soul is eternal servant of Krishna. So one who fixes himself in this proper understanding that I am an eternal servant of Krishna, so in that way, he actually achieves Krishna. The person who has thus, this word thus indicates that a person who is situated in this complete form of transcendental knowledge, that I have nothing to do with the functions, any of the functions of material mind, intelligence, and this gross body. Uh, I am an eternal servant of Krishna. So, so this is the meaning of thus. One who has situated in this transcendental himself in this transcendental knowledge. A person who has thus achieved me by understanding uh, that he is not different from me. What is the meaning? That the living entity, when he understands that I actually belong to the quality of the Supreme Lord. I do not belong to this material existence. The Supreme Lord Krishna is Sachidananda Vigraha. He is his domain, his personality is complete form of spiritual knowledge and bliss, eternal. So similarly, although I am engaged in this material body and some or others because of illusion, because of Maya, I identify myself with this material existence, with this material body, and so many different designations. But actually, I am aloof from all these things, and I'm, I'm on the same level of spiritual quality as the Supreme Lord. So that is the meaning of that He is not different from me. One should understand that Lord Krishna is saying that He is not different from me. He does not propose this nonsense Mayavad philosophy. The meaning is that when the living entity realizes that he is qualitatively one with the Lord. Qualitative oneness with the Lord means as the Lord is spiritual, Sachidananda Vigraha, Chinmay. Similarly, I being the part and parcel of Krishna, an eternal part and parcel of Krishna, I am also of the same quality. I am also spiritual. So I have nothing to do with this material existence. So a person who has thus achieved me by understanding that he is not different from me realizes that the material mind is lodged within the sense objects because of constant sense gratification. In such a person, he can realize that this material mind is lodged within sense object because we have been undergoing this series of constant sense gratification from time from last many millions and millions of births. We have been doing the same nasty activities of sense gratification, eating, sleeping, mating, defending. Uh, this is all a living entity does in this material existence. The most abominable of all is to engage in sex life in so many lifetimes because the mind has engaged in itself in the business of sense gratification. That is why this material mind is completely lodged within the sense object. So this can be realized by a person who has taken himself out of this material covering, gross and subtle covering. Such a person can immediately understand this is the nature of mind. So let the mind remain as it is. I have nothing to do with it, with the ideas or activities of mind. And also he realizes that the material objects are existing prominently within the material mind. So having understood my transcendental nature, but when he understands the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord and of himself also, because he himself belongs to the transcendental, same transcendental nature as the Supreme Lord. So then he gives up both the material mind and its objects. This is the only solution if one at all wants to become free from attachments. Otherwise, not possible. Impossible. Because it is so very powerful. You cannot at all uh, give up attachment for sense gratification. It's not in our, what you say, capacity to give up. It's not in our capacity to give because of constant sense gratification. Constant sense gratification has created such a great impulse uh, within impression or impulse within the mind of the living entity that practically it is impossible to give up sense enjoyment. Uh, the only solution is one should very firmly fix oneself in the transcendental knowledge, transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord, understanding very well that I am completely aloof from this. And then he will be able to give up both material mind and its objects. That means he will become callous to all those material activities of sense gratification, he will simply engage himself in the activities of devotional service. And that is what is known as this Vacho Vegam, Manasa Krodha Vegam, Cheva Vegam, Udarupastha Vegam. Means as long as we have the conclusion is, as long as we have this material body, having this material mind, then material sense objects are there. So that that Vega means that this desire for sense gratification will keep coming. That Vega means Vega को क्या बोलेंगे? वाचो वेगम impulse. Impulse. So that impulse for sense enjoyment uh, will naturally come within the material mind for sense objects. But one who can tolerate this urges, one who can means who can tolerate and who can keep himself aloof from these impulses is the person who is situated in transcendental knowledge. Then he can separate. So the Lord again states, let's read the purport also. The Lord again states here that it is most difficult to separate the material mind from its objects because the material mind, by definition, considers itself to be the doer and enjoyer of everything. It must be understood that giving up the material mind does not mean giving up all mental activities, but instead means purifying the mind and engaging one's enlightened mentality in the devotional service of the Lord. Since time immemorial, the material mind and senses have been in contact with the sense objects. Therefore, how is it possible for the material mind to give up its objects, which are the basis of its existence? Just imagine. That's why when a boy, uh, after getting attached to a girl, says that she is the basis of my existence. Uh, so that is not false. Why? Because he is completely identifying himself with the mind and body. And mind and material body is completely attached to the objects of sense gratification. So as long as one is identifying himself with this material mind and material body, so he will have this feeling of excessive attachment and he cannot give up. Uh, so for the material mind to give up its objects, it's not possible because this is the basis of its existence because material mind and its objects existed simultaneously. It cannot be separated. So only, but one has to understand his real position that I am not this material mind and body. So it is not me who is getting attached to the objects of sense enjoyment. And ultimately, all all kinds of this see simply because you feel something to be good, that does not mean the philosophy of Bhagavata will uh, can be proved wrong. Bhagavad philosophy you cannot prove wrong. Uh, Here it is clearly stated the material mind is attached to the objects of senses, sense object and material mind. Somebody may say anything. I'm not attached for sense gratification. No, it cannot happen. That is the nature of material mind. So we should accept this is first. This is the first step if one at all wants to become free from material attachments. That one has to clearly understand and accept that my mind is materially attached for the purpose of sense gratification. That's all. So, so when one understands this and accepts this, yes, this is true. Then he can next take further step, understanding that okay, this mind, my mind is attached to objects of sense gratification for the purpose of getting some material sense enjoyment. But I am not this mind. So I have nothing to do with this activity of mind with the objects of the senses. So let the mind remain attached. My business is to attach myself to my original attachment, Krishna. So then one can give up.
Mhm. So not only does the mind reach out to material objects, but also because of the mind's desire, the material objects cannot remain out of the mind, helplessly entering at every moment. Yeah. So not only does the mind reach out to material objects, it's not that just your mind is just going to somewhere. Yeah. That is also coming. Very clear, no? Uh, this can be understood through this this is best example. A girlfriend, a boyfriend. Just like a boy is too much attached to a girl, similarly a girl is also too much attached to a boy. Huh? So when it is two-way transaction, then it is very difficult to give up. If it is only one way, you can give up. But if it is two-way, you cannot give up. So the same thing, this the mind, it's and not only does the mind reach out to material objects, but also because of the mind's desires. Because there are desires within the mind for sense enjoyment, the material objects cannot remain out of the mind. Material objects are within the mind constantly. The mind is constantly contemplating about the material objects for the purpose of service to Krishna. No, don't misunderstand it. Don't try to cover the reality by saying, oh, for the service of Krishna, we are going to live together eternally. This is nonsense. You cannot cheat. At least you cannot cheat Krishna. You can cheat so many other people. You can cheat yourself. Maybe somebody maybe is into so much illusion that she might be thinking that I'm not attached for sense gratification. But you cannot cheat the Supreme Lord, and certainly Bhagavatam cannot be proved false. The only purpose is sense gratification, because of which the objects of sense objects are within the mind. So mind, because of mind's desire to enjoy sense gratification, material objects cannot remain out of the mind, helplessly entering at every moment, helplessly entering at every moment. So thus, now here very carefully, huh? You have to understand it very clearly. The separation between the mind and sense objects is not actually feasible. Feasible means not practical, not possible. Possible. It's like don't try to do it. If you suppose if you are getting attached for some sense enjoyment, some sense object, if you think because of this I'm getting so much distress, so much frustration, let me change the sense object, go somewhere else, do something else. No, that won't work, because that's not possible. It's not possible. This is Bhagavad philosophy. Separation between the mind and the sense objects is not actually feasible, nor does it serve any purpose. It won't serve also any purpose, because mind's requirement is thinking, feeling, willing. You must apply it. You cannot just say no, no, no. You must apply it. Thinking, feeling, willing. Otherwise, mind will become very, very. सुनो पहले आगे. Nor does it serve any purpose. If one retains a material mentality, considering oneself to be supreme, one may renounce sense gratification, considering it to be ultimately the cause of unhappiness. But one will not be able to remain on such an artificial platform, nor will such renunciation serve any real purpose. Last line, very carefully, you must understand it. Without surrender to the lotus feet of the Lord, mere renunciation cannot take one out of this material world. There is no other way. That's why Lord Krishna said, "Taivihi esha gunamayi, mama maya duratyaya, mameva ye prapadyante, maya metam tarantite." This material nature, duratya, is very powerful to overcome. But mameva prapadyante maya metam tarantite. One who surrenders fully unto me, he can become free. So without surrender to the lotus feet of the Lord, mere renunciation cannot take one out of this material world. Just as sun's rays are part of the sun, the living entities are part of the Supreme Personality of God. When the living entity is completely absorbed in his identity as a part and parcel of the personality of Godhead, he becomes actually wise and easily gives up the material mind and sense objects altogether. You cannot do that, you give up material objects and retain material mind. That's not possible. But when a living entity understands his real identity as a part and parcel of the personality of Godhead, then he actually becomes wise and understands that I have nothing to do with the material body, the senses, mind, and its objects. So he can easily give up both material mind and sense objects. So the word Mother Rupa in this verse indicates absorption of the mind in the form, qualities, pastimes, and associates of the Supreme Personality of God. Immersed in such ecstatic meditation, one should render devotional service to the Lord, and this will automatically drive away the influence of sense gratification. By himself, the living entity does not have the potency to give up his false identification with the material mind and sense objects. But by worshipping the Lord in the mood of being his eternal part and parcel servant, one is infused with the Lord's potency, which easily drives away the darkness of ignorance. Yeah. So, the philosophy is we have nothing to do with this material mind and material sense objects. So ultimately, understanding it very well that I am eternal part and parcel of Krishna, servant of Krishna. So I must give up both this material mind and its sense objects. But a living entity on itself, he cannot give up this. He cannot do this because we are very, very minute, insignificant. Uh, what is our insignificancy? क्या है हमारी औकात? जैसे कोई बोलता है ना, एक बार एक भक्त बोल रहे थे, प्रभु ये सेल्फ रिस्पेक्ट का बात है प्रभु, सेल्फ रिस्पेक्ट, हाँ मेरी औकात की बात है प्रभु। मैं बोला प्रभु मालूम है हमारी आपकी औकात हमारी औकात सबकी औकात बताई गई है शास्त्र में, श्वेता स्वतर उपनिषद में, केशाग्र शतभागस्य शतधा कल्पितस्य च, दिस इज आवर औकात ना। जब भी ये फॉल्स ईगो का है ना, मेरा सेल्फ रिस्पेक्ट, तो सेल्फ रिस्पेक्ट में फिर ये श्लोक याद कर लेने का हमारी औकात क्या है। वी आर 1/10,000 पार्ट ऑफ द टिप ऑफ हेयर। ये हमारी औकात, इतने छोटे हैं हम, दिख भी नहीं सकते हैं। एक बाल का अग्रभाग का एक 10,000वां हिस्सा है ना। So this is our position. So there's a living entity because he's so insignificant. So it's not possible for the living entity, even after understanding, to give up his false identification with the material mind and sense objects. That's why it's written by himself. The living entity does not have the potential to give up his false identification with the material mind and sense objects. Uh, Just like all of us, we are sitting here, we are hearing, we are understanding from so many days, some of you, so many months, so many years, so many decades also, that we are not this body, we are a spirit soul, we have nothing to do with this material mind and its objects, then why still we can't give up that desire for sense enjoyment? Because the nature of the living entity is that it is very, very minute, insignificant. So we have to accept this. That's why the only solution is now, the solution is, the first thing is to have the understanding that I'm not this material mind and its object. I have nothing to do with. I must give it up. But in order to give up this false identification with material mind and its sense objects, I require potency. Potency is required. So let me earn potency from the source of potency, the all potent. Who is that all potent? Omnipotent, the Supreme Lord. So such a person who is sincere about making his life successful, who is sincere about giving up all false identification with the material mind and sense object, then he becomes very intense in worshipping the Lord, uh, in the mood of being his eternal part and parcel servant. So when one actually who is sincere and serious, when one intensely worships, serves, remembers the Lord in the mood of his eternal part and parcel servant, when one is infused with the Lord's potential, then Supreme Lord is potent. He infuses such a sincere devotee with his spiritual potency, then which easily drives away the darkness of ignorance. Then it is quite possible to give. It's not impossible. I think one can do. Okay, time is up. Uh,
we'll discuss more about this tomorrow. But this is very nice verse. So, sense. So when one is thus infused with the potency of the Supreme Lord by taking shelter of his lotus feet, when one becomes potent, spiritually potent, then he is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects. And then such a person is called as, he is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Is there any question? You can ask. So how exactly surrender looks like? Surrender means to obey the instructions of the Supreme Lord. And how exactly it looks like? The surrender means that one is constantly taking shelter of his lotus feet, Krishna's lotus feet. So we have to learn the art of molding our life in such a way that 24 by 7 we can remain in constant touch with the Supreme Lord, either by chanting his holy name, either by hearing about him or serving him through any means in this way. So if one can train himself, this training means it may take some time, but at least one should start. But it is not impossible. This is possible uh, in whatever activity we may be doing. But this hearing about Krishna and chanting about Krishna is so powerful, and because of this practice, one can gradually come to that stage of constantly remembering Krishna. So when one reaches to this stage of constantly remembering Krishna 24 by 7, yad anudhyasina yukta karma granthi nibandhana, that is explained in the Bhagavatam. Yad anudhyasina yukta. Anudhya. Anudhya means constant remembering. Yad anudhyasina asina. Anudhyasina means this sword. Asina means sword. This is explained in first canto, second chapter, verse 15. यद अनुध्यासिना युक्ता कर्म ग्रंथि निबंधनम छिन्दन्ति को विदास्तस्या को नु कुर्यात् कथारतिम. So, with sword in hand, intelligent men cut through the labyrinthine knots of reactionary work or karma by remembering the Lord. Therefore, who will not pay attention to his messages? So, yad anudhya asina. Anudhya means constant remembrance. Asina. So, with the sword of constant remembrance of the Supreme Lord, the intelligent person, Kovida, they cut this nibandhanam, internet. Uh, they can cut it and they can free themselves from this material self gratification and become free. So, our business is to practice, to remember Krishna all the time. And this practice becomes very easy when one chants the holy name of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Ram. And also when one hears, the more one hears, the more one chant, then this becomes easy. Clear? Any other question? Hare Krishna.
चैंटिंग से मॉर्निंग प्रोग्राम फॉलो होने लग जाएगा क्या? मतलब कुछ भी पॉसिबल है ना, तो हो सकता है
Yes,
क्या?
yes, yes, हो सकता है. Chanting से, by taking shelter of Krishna's lotus feet, anything is possible. The only thing one has to do is one should have complete faith and one should not be demotivated, discouraged. And as soon as some demotivation, discouragement comes, one should recite this verse. एतां सास्थाय परात्मनिष्ठां मध्यासितां पूर्वतमर्महर्षभिः अहं तरिष्यामि दुरन्तपारं तमो मुकुन्दं गृणीष्यैव यैव. So then immediately I will cross over this insurmountable, powerful, this desire for sense enjoyment. I will give up all material attachment by firmly taking shelter of Krishna's lotus feet. And what does it mean to firmly take shelter of Krishna's lotus feet? By chanting his holy name and by hearing about him. I don't feel it in my life at all. Ever since I started coming to classes regularly again, and it scares me, but it doesn't scare me enough. It scares and doesn't scare. It's contradictory. It scares me, but doesn't scare me enough to focus again. Try and try. What can we say?